Hello and welcome everyone to today's session delivered by the Nottingham and Derby branch of the BCS. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. The branch likes to carry out an inclusion and diversity questionnaire, and this gathers a little bit of information for BCS HQ. I'll give you a moment to get your cameras out and take a photograph of this code here, and you could also use the URL. We'll present the URL in the chat window as well, so you can get a chance to carry out the questionnaire during this presentation. We'd like to carry out two quick polls that also help us to understand our audience. In a moment, you'll see the first question. Please select the best answer and then send the poll, and we'll show another one after a little while. So we'll be handing over to Paul, who is our mission controller today, who's going to be presenting the polls and also be handling the questions for us a bit later. So Paul, could you show the first poll, please? Hopefully you see that. So if asking if everyone is a BCS member. Give you a moment to complete that poll. Okay, Paul, are we ready for the second poll? Thank you. Can see all the results coming in. Okay, very good. Excellent. Thank you for completing the poll. Right. The order of business today, Gareth will be giving his presentation and he will take the questions at the very end. But we invite you to submit your questions using the questioned dialog box, and the questions will be read out at the end of the presentation. We encourage you to fill out as many questions as you possibly can, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. Thank you. Gareth, it's over to you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Okay, I just need to select the correct screen to present. Okay, if someone can just confirm they can see the slide, we'll start. Firstly, thank you very much to the BCS for allowing me to present tonight. I hope everybody finds it informative. I've got quite a lot to get through, so this is why we've asked for questions at the end, but I'll do my best to answer all of them. This is a repeat of a presentation I did in a face-to-face environment in January, which talked about the modern workplace here at Uniper from requirements to rollout. And I was asked by the BCS if I would consider to represent it and also consider adding a section on how everything went since lockdown. So this is what I've done. So I aim to take you through that in 3 parts. Okay, this is me. You can contact me at gareth.naylor@uniper.ng or at Twitter, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer questions on follow-up. Okay, so 5 main parts. My digital workplace, I'll explain that. Context, requirements and design. My digital workplace, rollout and lessons learnt. And then the section around COVID-19. Final slide on final thoughts and reflections, and then we'll go into the questions and answer. Okay. First of all, I am instructed by my employer to give you a quick overview of the company I work for, which is Uniper. We're a multinational company in Europe and Asia and America. We're energy utility, and we get involved in lots of aspects of the end-to-end value chain of energy. You can find us on Twitter. We're quite active, talking a lot about hydrogen at the moment. We're about 11,000 employees spread in various countries in different time zones. Okay, let's talk about my digital workplace. So I'm going to talk about the workplace in Uniper, and it's really a small part of a much bigger topic in that the My Digital Workplace considers all of the aspects of the Microsoft 365 that end users interact with. So our productivity, my data, our collaboration, my work, and finally, but not least, my devices. And the items around the outside of ring of this circle are really behaviors we wanted to see happen as we started to roll out this digital workplace and encourage our colleagues to be more digital in the way they work. And this slide was first produced in probably early 2019, and to be fair, we've done a pretty good job of it, and our colleagues have picked it up really quickly, and COVID has really accelerated that, and I'll come on to that. There's three items in bold: Power Apps, Cortana, and Workplace Analytics, and these are things that we still have to do, but the majority of the rest is nearly done, which is really good. Okay, so where did we come from? Uniper is a spin out from E.ON nearly 4 years ago now, and we were using a shared workplace from E.ON with a company around 60,000 users, totally on-premise, Active Directory, System Center Config Manager, E.ON Authentication. At that time, it was relatively not liked by a lot of colleagues in that wider company, including myself in that. There were lots of SLAs that were slow, and so we had the opportunity in Uniper, once in a lifetime opportunity, to do our own thing and do something different. So we wanted to move to a modern workplace based on Windows 10, definitely not on premise. Obviously, it had to be separate from our previous company, and we wanted to delight our 11,000 users and give them something fit for a modern digital company. So when we started to think about this, we started to think about requirements, and there's always two user requirements that are in every IT topic. They want it to go really fast, and they want it to work from anywhere in the world. So we hadn't really envisaged Starlink by Elon Musk at the time, but we set about trying to solve both those requirements. So from an architecture point of view, this is a pretty key slide, and something that set the foundation for what we delivered. We wanted to deliver customer satisfaction. We wanted to make identity become the perimeter and context of, instead of the company network. We were moving on to protecting information and not just devices. We decided we didn't want to rely on any on-premise infrastructure, and so therefore everything must be managed securely from the cloud. We were moving to Windows 10, and we didn't want to use any non-Microsoft software that was deep into the operating system, and we knew it would cause us problems if we did with feature upgrades and feature releases. And we'd had that experience previously with Windows 7 in our previous company. And because we knew we wanted to operate this environment from anywhere, and we knew that the threat from cyber criminals is ever increasing, we wanted to deliver a step change in security. It needed to be performant, and we wanted to break the need to be on a company network to build or reset or refresh a device. At this time, we had offices around the world where they had their own networks. We didn't have our own support teams in place, and this was the requirement. And it summed up into any three: any device, any network, any place. And on the right-hand side, you could see the kind of building blocks of the pyramid. We wanted to move to the cloud, so that was Azure, identity and access management, then a security layer, a software distribution layer. We'd committed ourselves to Office 365 Pro Plus. Obviously, we have some other core apps that everybody uses. I mean, typical one I quote is always Acrobat Reader. Then we have business unit apps that are specific to the business and employee works in, and of course, last but not least, we have the user. And as it turns out, this actual architecture and principles turned out to be pandemic agnostic, and I'll come on to that later. So how do we start about building this? So you have to lay your foundation stones first when you're building a house. And the foundation for this was the network, and we didn't do that very well. I'll come on to that. But a keystone is identity and access management. So we wanted to use modern authentication. We wanted to try and get away from on-premise Active Directory. This is something we didn't manage to do. I'll talk about that. We needed to use multi-factor authentication, especially if identity is going to be the perimeter. We wanted to use Windows 10 Signature Edition, something that was fairly new, autopilot and out-of-the-box experience, which is what OOBE means, and also a range of devices. We needed the platform to be hardware independent. We managed to sort out the identity and access management topics. We didn't quite sort out our network. We're only just getting to the point where we've managed that, and that's definitely a learning lesson for us. Okay, there are other design goals, and I'll quickly run through this slide. We had to move from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Windows 7 was going out of support. We wanted to move from on-premise to the cloud. We wanted to increase the speed of our SLAs, building machines, end user getting a machine, resetting a machine, installing software, and through that increase the NPS from something that was pretty unsatisfactory to a bunch of happy users and good net promoter score. Importantly, we wanted to move from having a lockdown image type of model, a restricted range of hardware, to using Windows 10 as a platform. So basically we're allowing, if we want to, various different departments and business units to use different hardware over and above a more standard set. As long as it met a minimum requirement, then we could use it. And this was especially important in emergency situations where we have engineers and consultants that travel the world. If their machine gets broken, stolen, whatever, they can go into the nearest IT shop, buy a machine of a minimum specification and build it from outside the company network and carry on working. And that brings me on to the next point, where we wanted it to be a self-service, build your machine from anywhere approach. We wanted to try and save money, which was difficult because we were a smaller company than our parent company. We needed to increase the security footprint, which we've done, and we needed to make the system overall less complicated, so less moving parts, less interactions, less dependencies. So if you look on the right-hand side, we've gone through the design process and we'd settled on everything we wanted to use. Just to explain some of the acronyms there, ATP is Advanced Threat Protection, MIP is Microsoft Information Protection. At the time I wrote this slide, originally it was Azure Information Protection. This is the tool that allows you to classify and protect documents. The rest I've explained. We were managing the machines via Microsoft Intune and conditional access. We had a missing piece of the puzzle, which was software distribution. And at the time, there was no Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and there were no other solutions really to from Microsoft to distributing, Win32 software packages via Microsoft Intune. So we needed to fill that gap, and we needed a cloud-based software packaging and distribution service. Uniper is a German company. We were introduced to a Microsoft partner in Germany called Gluckenkanya, who had a product called RealmJoin. And it turns out that RealmJoin fitted the bill. And it's a companion to Intune. It doesn't replace it. It supports, importantly, deploying native Win32 applications. It integrates into Microsoft BitLocker and provides other services. And these are just typical screenshots from RealmJoin here. This is the machine build screenshot, where RealmJoin is actually checking the compliance of your system before it will put any company software on it. And then this is a typical menu that a end user colleague can see where they can look down and install software that's delivered to them and or reinstall software or check if they've been delivered a piece of software. Pretty easy to use. Didn't take long for our colleagues in the business and IT to pick it up. So now we have the final puzzle piece, and there is a slide later where I will explain a bit more about how that works. Okay, so let's just talk about what we enabled in terms of the new user experience. So we're now able to receive hardware direct from the manufacturer in the cardboard box. There's no pre-installation of any special image. It's the manufacturer's image that comes on there. We have made some procurement contracts with certain manufacturers, and they do send us a preloaded Windows 10, it's not an image, but footprint minus promotional software, but that's it. This enables us to, as an end user, go through the out-of-the-box experience setup. They go through Azure Active Directory sign-in, so we're not domain joining these machines to an on-premise domain. They go through the enrollment to Intune and the device manager service. It's a background task. And then the first piece of software that's delivered is Realm Join, and this then controls a bit more of the enrollment process. And what software packages you get is dependent on membership of Azure Active Directory groups. And eventually you get to a functional desktop that has your core applications and your business unit applications and all your files from OneDrive for Business and data. This first part, if you're on a reasonable connection, takes 10 to 25 minutes, gigabit Ethernet, 10 minutes, standard broadband, maybe 25, company network, etc. The second part can take anything from half an hour to 90 minutes, depending on the number of applications you need to install to do your job. The great thing is you do this with an already created Office 365 account. Then after about 10 to 25 minutes, you can start to use the computer using a web browser and online Office 365. So in that scenario where you desperately need to get back to work, you just purchase a new piece of hardware, or you just need to get on, you can be up and running within 30 minutes, which is pretty good, really. And as I said before, this process turned out to be pandemic agnostic. You do not need to come into the office to do this process. You do not need remote access to do this process. Okay, I've made it sound fantastic, and it is, but we had some challenges to overcome. And reading from right to left, the first of which was actually making our out-of-the-box experience work on our company network. It requires quite a bit of network configuration and opening up ports and services to Microsoft and their Azure data centers so that it works. For a while, we were instructing users to take their new hardware home and building it on home broadband because it worked better at home than in the office. This is now sorted. We had to roll out multi-factor authentication. So typically we use the Authenticator app with Azure. People either use the app or they get a PIN code SMS to their phone to make sure it was secure. We still have, or did have, many applications that used legacy authentication, and they required a Kerberos token to work. And unfortunately, Azure AD doesn't deliver that. It's not a modern protocol. So this was the reason why we kept our on-premise Active Directory. So we have one now, mainly. And we synchronize various attributes between Azure AD and on-premise AD to achieve that. Our ambition, I guess, if you came and talked to me in 5 years' time, would be to remove that. Whether we will get there, whether it is worth us getting there, is still, to be discussed. We had a lot of heated discussions with our information security teams, especially about using the Microsoft Defender and ATP security stack and not having a third-party product as we used previously. I'm pleased to say, I think, having operated it for 18 months, we all think we've made the good decision. ATP turns out to be a brilliant piece of kit for keeping us safe. And yeah, our security colleagues are on board. Feature requests was an unknown. The first one was a bit bumpy. We've recently in the last 9 months, gone from, where was it? Gone to 1909, and we're now trialing 2004. That's working pretty well, and in a few months' time, we'll move the company to 2004. And then we come on to business apps. We had some remediation to do to get those working on Windows 10. We have some remediation to do to get those working in modern authentication. But generally, they've been pretty good. And we were seeing, once you found the binaries and installed them, rates of around 85 to 90% compatibility across our apps. We shouldn't underestimate the amount of change our colleagues and users needed to, soak up and take on board in moving from a Windows 7 lockdown workplace to a Windows 10 modern, work out of the box, build it yourself, Office 365 Pro Plus workplace. It's been a long journey. It's been a journey that's involved a lot of colleagues in change and adoption, but we're a long way through it, and lockdown has actually accelerated that, and I'll come on to that. And finally, the last bump in the road is network version 2, and this is about getting our company network that was architected for on-premise data centers re-architected to respect the fact that all our data, all our traffic is now in Microsoft's data centers and outside of our company network. So the volume of files in SharePoint online, the volume of files and data in OneDrive for Business is huge now, and this was beginning to cause congestion in our connections to the internet and Microsoft's data centers, and I'll come on to how we've coped with that later. Okay, so that's a quick run through on the design, very quick in fact. Let's talk about how we approach rollout. We started in October 2018. We came to a grinding halt at the end of 2018, and we completely revamped our approach. And the next slide will talk about that and why that is. Through January to August 2019, we really sprinted through from around 1,000 to 7,000 users, probably 9,000 by the end of the year. And then we started to block the use of Windows 7 on our network. So basically it wouldn't work. To flush out the hidden machines, the machines we don't know about, the ones under the desk, towards the end of last year. Now Uniper's in Sweden, and in Sweden we have nuclear power stations, and believe me, they have a lot more care and attention over and above what we already had, which is good in terms of moving desktop versions from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So we spent the back quarter of last year ensuring that we could meet the compliance requirements of that design, and starting to roll out in Sweden in November, December. And then in the first quarter of this year, we went in and finally completed the rollout of the new workplace in our nuclear power stations. The team that did that did an absolute fantastic job, because we got in and finished it by the end of March, which is just as lockdown was approaching. And the last thing you want is nuclear power station staff being infected with COVID-19, which we managed to avoid, and we managed to complete the project. So I take no responsibility or credit for that. It was a brilliant team effort of my colleagues in Sweden and Uniper IT. But let's go back and talk about this explosion here, because I think it's relevant. So this Dilbert I really like, because we were started off with the Windows 10 rollout as a kind of IT number-led approach. How many machines have we rolled out this week? How many machines are we going to roll out this week? How many Windows 7 machines have we taken away? And you notice I'm talking about machines. I'm not talking about colleagues, end users, business requirements. And so after a couple of months of trying to just talk about machines and push things out, things went wrong, and we had to stop and redesign everything. And we introduced the concept of user experience managers, which proved critical. We redesigned the migration process and options from a business process point of view. We invested far more time and resources in change and adoption. And we introduced business readiness checkpoints and business sign-off, meaning business and department leaders could say to the IT department, you haven't completed everything to our satisfaction. That means I'm not happy for you to roll out into my unit, or positively, I'm now happy for you to roll out, we know everything will work. And this significantly reduced the tension and enabled a good dialogue and a smooth rollout. In addition, we focused a lot more on communications in different channels as well. We realized that just digital comms, intranet, and by the way, Ping is our intranet site, it's the name for it, wasn't going to work on its own. So we introduced breakfast, on-site local events, and I really don't like this word, but it's true, we localized the message. So we took the global message and we localized it for the department and business where the breakfast events were happening. Nothing gets people to an event more than 3 croissants and orange juice. It's a good tip. We created an ambassador network. So we got keen colleagues from the business to become ambassadors for us. And they were brilliant at helping smooth the path, encourage people to go through the process of registering and migrating. We put a lot of effort into creating knowledge base and help articles we use ServiceNow in our knowledge database. And we created a massive e-learning center on Ping. It's really good. Unfortunately, I don't have the time today to go through it with you, but we didn't just do it for Windows 7, we did it for Teams, we did it for Skype, we did it for SharePoint, we did it for a lot of the features in the My Digital Workplace wheel. In conjunction with that, we had migration classrooms where we had posters up on the wall, colleagues would bring their machine, would go through a process with them, and while that process was running, we would show them video and other materials to help them learn how to use their new machine. And they had an info pack which they could take with them. And we promoted the whole migration service through the use of posters and QR codes dotted around buildings. For our senior leadership team, which is around the top 80 to 100 employees in Uniper, we gave them a bit more customized and special support, mainly because they needed it. They're very busy people, but also we wanted them to be positive ambassadors of the approach and actually look their direct reports in the eye and say, well, I've done it, why can't you? Why can't your team? And again, that was successful. Okay, some quick lessons learned then. In my original presentation in January, there's 3 slides, but I've had to cut it down for time. You really need to start with reliable data, both in terms of machines, users, and devices. I really love this quote. Managing data with Excel is like printing books in stone. So we did manage data in Excel, and it was torturous. So if you have a better system, maybe a relational database where you can collect configuration information that's up to date before you start such a rollout, it's a great idea. The project team, I think, needed to accept that some users would have genuine deviations from the global standard for very good business reasons, and we had to take them into account. And initially, that led to more people than we wanted having local admin rights. And we've clawed that back a little bit, but it was required. Yeah, and there's some behavior stuff. Stop saying the project should do. We still haven't fully removed silo thinking. We had this thing in Uniper called the Uniper Way, and it's pretty starkly quoted there, we don't do silo thinking, so we work as one team. On a more positive side, the user experience managers concept really worked and was very well received, and we have used it again and will use it again in such time where we have to do other major changes. So what are the overall results of Windows 10? And then the next slide, we'll talk about My Digital Workplace, and then we'll move on to the next section of the presentation. Okay, user satisfaction was poor, it's now very good. This slide was written in January. I would actually say it's extremely good now, and you'll understand why soon. Hardware delivery time it was really 1 to 2 weeks, and we've reduced that down to less than 48 hours. Hardware choice is now wide, although we do have some standard models. We're not limited by hardware, but previously it was really narrow. Time to productivity, if you're building a new machine, is around 2 hours now, whereas before it was over 1 day, and quite often you had to wait for 1 day for software packages to arrive. Yeah, and software distribution, we can get a piece of software to your machine ready to install within 30 minutes from it being ordered and approved. And some pieces of software don't need approval, so it's even quicker. It was over 1 day in our old system, and you had to be in the office or connected with remote access for it to work. Security, it patches as and when needed now. Microsoft security updates and other updates are delivered direct to your machine, regardless of where you are. And we have a first-class security suite with Azure ATP and Microsoft ATP, whereas previously it was reliant on you using remote access. So if you were traveling for 2 weeks and you didn't use remote access, you didn't get security updates for 2 weeks, which was a big risk. We've reduced the vendor complexity, certainly in the base system platform that everyone gets. It's really Microsoft Realm Join and then a couple of other non-Microsoft core applications. We can work from anywhere now, and the service has proved really reliable, whereas before it was intermittent. We did manage to achieve a slight cost reduction compared to before. That's quite an interesting debate because we went to being a smaller company, so the price at which we bought hardware went up, but we required less support services to cope with the service, and so overall we achieved a reduction, which was pleasing. So what about the whole My Digital Workplace journey? The usage of Office 365 is now very good. The usage of OneDrive is now very high. The usage of Teams for collaboration is widespread, and I'll talk about meetings subsequently. Service Hub meetings was frequent. It's not very frequent at the moment, which is why it's got an asterisk by it, because we're not in our offices where they are. Sharing and co-authoring was common in the first part of this year. It's now extremely high because of lockdown. We've introduced chatbots, whereas we didn't have them before, to help us. Mobile working is extremely widespread now. 8,000 roughly employees are doing it on a weekly basis. We proved we can work from any location, and user satisfaction is very high. Ironically, what wasn't inside the office was our network performance, and we were getting poor NPS results at the back end of last year as a result of moving all our data and files into the cloud. And if you remember back to the foundation slide, I had a red cross against the network. We hadn't done the preparation work. That was a timing, budgeting, resource availability clash, really. But luckily, or not, depending on your view, for us at the moment, most colleagues have not been in the office for months, so we're using that opportunity for good. Okay, so COVID-19. If I've done my maths correctly, we started working from home, or the majority of our staff started working from home 28 weeks ago. And we were told Friday afternoon that on the Monday we weren't coming into the office. And that was a directive from the board of management. The management within the unit IT probably got 1 or 2 days notice. So, however, things carried on working. We were fortunate, I guess, in our choice of strategy. The Windows 10 service designed to work outside the workplace carried on working. The Office 365 service, now the Microsoft 365 service, carried on working. There was some initial wobbling with Teams and Teams meeting, which was not due to our architecture, but more the massive scaling that Microsoft had to do overnight or within a couple of weeks. And they did that really well. And that's been really reliable. And I'd like to publicly go on record and thank Microsoft for that. And just while we're on this slide, I'll point out, which I stole from a colleague, by the way, I'll point out this bubble here. So this is where our software distribution world lives. Realm Join uses nougat and chocolatey as a packaging technology, and GitLab as a versioning repository for all our software. So again, totally outside of our network. Yeah, so end user feedback was brilliant. And these are direct quotes from our intranet, and couldn't really have asked for much better feedback, actually. I really like the goalkeeper analogy. And our stock price, as it were, Unipriority stock price, went from 0 to hero within a couple of weeks. And there's nothing like asking 8,000 users to work from home permanently, semi-permanently, to make them start using the technology that they've been ignoring on and off for a while. So we were really happy with that, but not too smug because we had work to do. Interestingly, we saw a massive uptake in the usage of Teams, maybe not surprisingly. Before lockdown, we were using Teams for collaboration, but we weren't, outside of IT, using Teams for meetings, virtual meetings. We were using Skype. We were actually running a Skype to Teams transition project before lockdown. It really only just got started. Pretty soon, within 3 weeks, all the users that were using Skype for meetings abandoned it and started using Teams. And you can see in the figures there on the right, the massive increase in chat messaging went on between January, February, all the way through the year. And September's data is not complete, by the way. So if you're wondering why that's dropped in September. And then also the number of people participating in meetings. And actually colleagues got Teams, and there was a lot of positive colleague feedback about features in Teams. And we did a lot of change and adoption as well. So not surprising, but it's really interesting to see the start figures and how adoption went through the roof. So back to the wheel of My Digital Workplace. One of the indirect impacts of COVID-19 and lockdown is people have started using the online services much more, specifically OneDrive, SharePoint Online, Teams for meetings. The number of teams created has increased massively. We've used team events for town hall meetings, and all the way up to the board. Our chief financial officer held a very successful Microsoft Teams event in August for the whole of his division. We've been using Mural and Whiteboard for virtual workspaces. By the end of this year, we'll probably just use Whiteboard for design thinking and ideation workshops. And as I said about the previous slide, we've abandoned Teams so much, Skype, so much so that we've actually flicked the switch to become a Teams only tenant now. This happened at the end of August. But what about processes? We continue to have people join us, and we continue to have people that leave Juniper for other careers or retire. And those processes carried on. We adapted the equipment provisioning process, and our corporate real estate management teams are doing a great job posting equipment to people's home addresses. And obviously you need to be careful around data privacy around people's home addresses, but it worked really well, and we had that up and running within a couple of weeks of lockdown. And because device build can be done from outside the company network, new starters are happening, they're getting set up, and we're getting really positive feedback from them. And many of them were genuinely surprised that once they joined Juniper, how quickly we could get them up and running, given that maybe for their other colleagues, if they're working students, were struggling in other companies. So that's been good. Maybe less good. We actually found out how many applications still need to use our remote access and VPN, and it's more than we would be happy with. So we'd started to document this in our enterprise application management system, and we aim to focus on reducing the need for a VPN. We're going to take a pragmatic approach. Some will stay, some will be migrated when they change, others will use other technology for, but that will be a focus for next year. We did quite a bit of work to ensure the VPN service, which wasn't critical before lockdown, it's now critical, is resilient enough. We also have improved the bandwidth, and we've also improved the SLA, and so, you know, from what I'd call wood class to gold class. We may need to invest in 2021 still in that technology, and we will do so if necessary. But from a strategic point of view, we don't see it as a strategic service in 2 or 3 years' time. Yeah, we took the opportunity to, when we were allowed back in our offices, to modernise them from a networking point of view. We've cleared up a lot of old and outdated network rooms and racking and, like, you know, things that just drift over time, retidied them up, redocumented them, improved their resilience, stability. We've been around and upgraded all the Wi-Fi in our buildings. So when our colleagues do go back to the offices, they'll have seamless Wi-Fi connectivity. We've reduced the number of LAN ports. That's actually saved us some money and funded the Wi-Fi upgrades. And we're investing in more regional and edge internet breakout connections that will solve the on-premise network troubles we've been having towards the back end of last year. We still need to think about a content distribution network. Doing large multi-user video Teams meetings or broadcasts is great when we're all using the internet. You come back inside your company's network, you need a CDN. All of this was completed in, of course, a COVID-19 compliant way. And penultimately, and this is new news for many people, only just recently published on Twitter, we started a new normal project. And this is a very consultative project with many colleagues involved, including, you know, from any role, position, all the way up to leadership teams, where we'll look at what the new normal means for us. We'll take our time, and we are going to reinvent, I guess, the physical workplace, along with maybe some of the digital workplace towards the back end of this year and early next year, so that Uniper is still a great place to work. Just conscious of time, move on to my final slide, and just want to reflect on all of that presentation. I appreciate it's been really quick, a lot to get through. Main reflections, really positive feedback for IT from the business. It turns out that NE3 was the right strategy. I must admit, when we set on that strategy, we didn't have in mind it will be tested overnight via a pandemic. So I guess from history, we'll see us as lucky. The hard work of the IT team in Sweden really paid off. It was so good that we got that done in time before lockdown happened. I can't praise more the change and adoption processes and teams behind that we led through our business. They did a super job in terms of training, webinars, train the trainer, drop-in sessions to help people get up to speed with the new tools, and they continue to do that. Microsoft definitely deserves a pat on the back, not only for providing such a good ecosystem, but actually keeping it running during this pandemic and continuing to do so. Opportunities. The new normal program is a great opportunity for us to go the next step. No idea what that's going to bring, but really excited to be involved in that. We continue to do network improvements to ensure that when our colleagues come back to offices, maybe it's 2 days a week, 3 days a week, or full time, it works seamlessly for them. And last point from me, we have a lot of work still to do on application modernisation, getting those applications to not need remote access, getting them to use platform as a service or software as a service, and ensuring that they don't need remote access to continue our journey into the cloud. So that's my last slide. Thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you for your attention. I hope you found it interesting. And back to Gary or Paul, and we can take some questions.
Thank you, Gareth, for your insightful presentation. Let's open up for audience input. Paul, do we have any questions?
We have 4 questions, Gary. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, right. I have 5 questions now. So if you want to ask questions, you can either put them into the questions pane or raise your hands, and I'll open the mic if you want to ask them verbally of Gareth. So question 1, Gareth. The first 4 are from Thierry Ackerman. Were
Okay.
the users involved in defining the principles and the framework?
Short answer is briefly. So we did some requirements analysis and some stakeholder interviews, but it wasn't done en masse. The principles slide, that has been work done by some colleagues where they looked at conceptual architecture for a more modern company. And basically, myself and 2 other colleagues, we summarised that into that slide, and we then socialised that around senior management within IT and some people in the business. But the short answer is no, we didn't ask a lot of users. But having said that, the colleagues that I involved from IT had many years experience in the workplace and had taken a lot of feedback over the previous workplace we moved from. So we weren't starting from no requirements. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Second question again from Thierry. Can users also use their personal laptops?
Oh, that's a great question. Technically, yes. So if it meets a minimum specification, and so the most important thing from our point of view is to have a device with a trusted platform module, and so we can store the keys for BitLocker, which encrypts your hard drive in there. So if you're willing to do this, we did have 1 or 2 colleagues accidentally do this, domain join their home machine to Azure Active Directory, then it will download a minimum set of compliance policies. And once those policies have been put in place, then we can secure Uniper's data. Whether you want to do that is a different question. Do we encourage it within Uniper at this moment in time? No. We don't see the need to do it, but it's a level of flexibility that we offer.
Okay. Third question again from Thierry. What is the one thing you would do differently?
Oh, good question. Definitely have, I'm going to answer with 2 things actually, because I think they're both important. Definitely have a user experience manager and ambassador set up before you start rollout. From a technical side of things, convince your senior management to invest more in the network preparations before you start. And let me put a bit more flesh on that. So once we got the out-of-the-box experience working, the building working of machines inside a company network, the thing that gave us poor user satisfaction was actually where users had moved their data to OneDrive and SharePoint Online. So in a sense, we were a victim of our own success. It created bottlenecks in the connections to the internet and Microsoft data centers. So invest in the network first.
Okay. Last question from Thierry. What is the one thing you're most proud about?
Oh, I think it's the fact that we went from Friday to Monday in March, and roughly 8,000 people left their offices, like myself, carrying a monitor arm, a monitor and a docking station, never to return, not been back in 28 weeks. And the company just carried on working on Monday. And I think it surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, I concur with that. Okay, next question from Hedi Azur. What could be the reason why the numbers for chat and meetings fell so rapidly in September? Do you have any explanation for this?
That's easy. The data on that slide was taken on 9th of September, so it's not a full month.
Hotmail. Okay.
So I don't believe it has fallen. We haven't finished the month yet.
Okay. Next question from Matthew Chamberlain. As you've been rolling the Microsoft technology stack for a couple of years now, obviously technology moves on and they have released new products and further enhancements. Are you planning to review what you have already put in and update to newer versions, etc., such as replacing Realm Join for the native Win32 app service in Intune?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I describe Realm Join as a really good product, first of all, and also Gluck & Canyon are a great company. But when we put it into the architecture, we described it as a temporary solution. Now, it's a long-term temporary solution. It's working well for us. It's price competitive, and we have other priorities to focus on, which means we can leave it running. There will come a point, and I'm not going to give you a year or a date, maybe it's within the next year, next 2 years, or even next 3 years, when we'll review it and go, this is the time to move our software distribution capability from where it is today to Microsoft Product X version Y. But we're quite happy with it. And we don't see the urgent need to change now. We are tracking Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and obviously that's coming into Intune more and more every month. So maybe it happens next year, but as I said, it's not a priority.
Okay. Next question from Matthew Chamberlain again. Will you be looking to move some of the networking and VPN technologies to the Microsoft Azure stack, such as Azure vWAN?
To be honest, I don't know what Azure, whatever you just said, Paul, is.
vWAN, it says here.
Okay. So we currently use Pulse Secure as our VPN client. I haven't covered it in this presentation, but we're a customer of Zscaler or Zscaler for internet access security from our company network. We are evaluating their Zscaler private access capability. So I would probably say if we move from Pulse Secure and nothing's decided, we'd go with ZApp and ZPA. We are, so just to explain why, I have this concept of wanting to invert the model. And what I mean by that is our colleagues, our end users need to understand in advance at the moment when they need to start the VPN. They need to know that this app doesn't work unless I start the VPN. And I want to flip that model so the end user colleague just clicks the icon for the application and the system behind it works out whether it needs a micro tunnel to make that application work. And the colleague, the end user, doesn't even know that it's happening, and everything else that's happening at the time carries on working.
Okay. Before I go to the last question in the list, if anyone wants to ask a question verbally, just raise your hand in the panel. Interesting last question here, Gareth. Is a good leader in for Gary when he announces next month's event. Has Juniper ever been hacked? And if you were, how would you cope?
Oh, I'm not sure if I can answer that question because this is a public forum. We have a cyber defense center which monitors various things I'm not going to go into 24/7. We are a utility, so we have national critical infrastructure in the the countries we operate in. I can tell you this probably because I asked the head of our information security team this question a month ago. I said to him, so we're 3 or 4 months into lockdown. We have these computers directly connected to the internet. I mean, they run the firewall, etc. 5 days a week, 30 to 40 hours a week. What's our security incident rate looking like now? We're no longer behind our corporate network most of the time. And they said, well, we've had 2 incidents. One was One was a phishing malware injection attack. That was detected and blocked by Defender ATP. And the other one was a piece of a colleague having a piece of software they shouldn't have installed ever on their machine, and they had local admin rights, and that was dealt with appropriately. I think that's going to be my answer, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, Gareth. Okay, Gary, there's no more questions in the questions pane, and no one has raised their hands. So back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so on behalf of Nottingham and Derby branch, I would like to offer a hearty thank you to Gareth for giving up his time to be with us today. And where would we be without you, our audience? Thank you, everyone. And before we close the session, I would like to take a moment to introduce next month's session, which will take place on the 19th of October. And hopefully you can actually see the advert.
No, I'm just going to make you presenter, Gary.
Okay, give me a second.
There you go.
Oh, now I can see it. All right, here we go. So we will have another session on COVID-19 titled Infected Information Security. And we're going to have a panel of up to 5 speakers from SciTech and BCS. And again, that's on the 19th of October. Hope to see you there. Thanks again, everyone, and have a good day.